So good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, good evening, wherever you're from. This is Jeremy Nathan with JN Training. Thank you for joining us. This is the Chattanooga Technology Meetup Group. Thanks you so much for joining. We're going to be showing you Python and VBA and Excel. And Loretta Jones will be leading the talk today. Okay. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Loretta.
Okay, so we are going to begin. Okay, are you seeing my screen?
Yeah, I see the teams there on your screen.
Okay, so we're going to begin with a VBA. Not this one, we're going to begin with the other one.
And I'll send the sorry to interrupt. I'll send the PowerPoint into the chat too.
Okay, very nice.
Or into the,
so we're going to talk about the power of VBA macros for Excel. With VBA, you can do a lot of things you could never do with the normal functions of Excel. So the first macro we're going to talk about adds time from a daily timesheet to open projects and effort hours worksheets. And it is for in a construction project manager. It saves about 2 hours a day if he has 150 employees. This is what the daily timesheet looks like. In the columns at the top, these are the jobs that will get posted to. In the body is the employees and the hours worked. And in in this workbook, there is a timesheet for each day. Then there are the effort hours, and so there's the timesheet for each day. There are the effort hours recorded and open projects. And actually in the real-time sheet, there are probably about 20 worksheets that do a lot of other things that we don't have to worry about today. So the little total, craft, and overhead in the right-hand side, that is the total, the way they total their hours. And they really have to keep very tight totals on all of this. This is what the open projects worksheet looks like. So in these descriptions, this will be the thing that gets matched up, and over in expended man hours, that's where the time will be applied. And you can imagine, okay, so here is the effort hours worksheet. Each time the program runs, it updates this, so it keeps a cumulative total by category. And at the end of the year, he has a template. All he has to do is copy that template and rename it for the next year. This manually adding the time consisted of applying the time from the totals line, which is down at the bottom here, to each of the columns that were at the top. So it would be copy pasting this, searching for it, and then putting that time in. So you can imagine, here is an example of what one of those cells would look like. So this is the cell that for the first, row 9 on the sheet. And my client would just add hours each time he updated that. So it was very cumbersome and very difficult, easy to make a mistake, very difficult to find the mistake. So this program, the VBA macro, actually displays a message box with all totals for verification, so he can verify that that looks right, that it's the correct hours. It updates the effort hours sheet for the current month, and it uses the date on the worksheet to determine what day it is, what the date is. And then it updates the man hours expended by job on the open project sheet. This is an example of the message box. So it tells how many projects got updated and each category of hours. This is before the macro, so you see the July effort hours. The macro runs. Here are the values that get added, and then the total after the macro is run. And this shows the before and after on the open project sheet. So if you look at electrical requirements, there's it has had the hours added to it. So we'll do that for every project in the worksheet. And that's probably about 3 pages. We'll view that. So we'll view the actual Excel. So this is the timesheets, what the timesheet looks like. So there's one page has room for about 35 or 36 employees. And the way the VBA macro knows it's breaking on a page is it finds this totals line. So it finds the total in that column. And you can see where it gets the date from that it's going to update right here on the sheet. So the employees are listed, and this is quite a bit. It can even grow larger, especially during a shutdown. This actually might double in size, which also means doubling in the amount of work required to do it manually. And then he has a formula here to, this is a formula from the worksheet. So that is one way he checks to make sure everything got posted correctly. This has to match, the difference in this should match that message box that pops up. The open projects, this is what the open project sheet looks like. So these are, each one of these projects gets expended man hours get added. And there are a lot of formulas within this worksheet that are like the percentages, this highlighting, conditional highlighting in the red if it goes negative. And one reason this is so instrumental in keeping things on track is if the client is not able to calculate this daily, he can use all the man hours in a job before he realizes it. So it's really critical that it's very interactive and updated. This is the sheet, the effort hour sheet, and here's the template. So at the end of the year, all he has to do is copy this template and make it 2022 or 2024, whatever effort hours. And we will try, so to run the macro that does the adds the time, you just have to be on that day, whatever day you're doing. So we'll do Monday, and then I do Control R. Now these can be run manually. It's just a lot easier if you can have a control key, but when you're doing that, you have to set up a key that is not going to be like a Control S or something that's already used by Excel or Windows. So R is a good one, M is a good one, and there are others. And you could even do a Control Shift something. But so I'm going to do Control R and just let you see how quickly this updates. It's done. So you can imagine that would probably be the amount of time it would take to do one line if you were doing it manually. And now when we go to open projects, we have 694 instead of 693. If we do the effort hours, then that has increased by that day's amount. Does anybody have any questions or anything you'd like to see on just this part? Okay, so we will go to the next macro, and this one accrues time, hours and billing amount. It applies standard and overtime rates, so it tracks by employee and when they get over 40 hours, and there even are some stipulations as to whether, you know, like if it's a weekend, they get overtime anyway. So all that is taken into consideration. Then it creates an accrual detail sheet so that they can verify, or if something is off, they have ways of sorting and tracking that down if the hours are off or the amount is off. And this time savings on this is about 5 to 6 hours per week. The reason the time gets accrued, if they want the client, their customer wants a very up-to-date accounting of where they are, even if it's not been gone through the ERP system and been sent out as a bill. It's something, they're just operating in real time, and just like they need to know the hours of it, just like the project manager needs to know the hours of each job. So the company needs a good accounting and a really up-to-date accounting of what has been spent and what remains. So the invoice accruals, this macro actually creates these sheets. So this is one sheet, the top part, the bottom part, so it could be displayed. And it calculates all of, like we were talking about, over the hours, overtime. It picks up the employee rates based on either their employee or ID or the job that they're doing. And then the company applies the formatting they want for this. So they format it with the currency and some highlighting, centering. That could all be done with the VB, but they wanted to just do that themselves. So, which was easier for me too. Now this does the exact same thing, except it's doing the hours instead of the amount per job. So it's by job number. And this is the detail. So this actually could be sorted any way they need to. If they had an issue with the day, they could sort by that day. They can sort by employee. And the reason the names are this way, I actually wrote a very simple little Python program that would go through and change the names, because there are 7 sheets, one for each day of the week on the timesheets, and this 4 or 5 pages each. So manually, that would have been a really unrealistic task. So there's a simple Python program. It just takes a last name that I have in a list, and it applies an initial that I have in a list until it runs out of initials. It goes to the next last name, does the same thing. So it just made it a lot easier for me. And so any questions or comments on that one? And we will also run it. So to run it, I have to be on the day that I want to accrue through, and their week ends on Sunday. So if I'm on Sunday and I do Control M, you'll see it. I have to put in the date that I want to start with for overhead hours, and then the date that I want to start with for craft hours, and you'll see it create these sheets at the bottom. So we've got 3 sheets that were created. So this is the one that's the billing hours. And it just does a total out in this column at the bottom. This is sort of the format they're using, except they dress it up a little bit for the client. And this is the amounts, so for that time period, by job number. It has to be by job. And there were a lot of things that had to happen inside the Excel sheet. If we look at open projects, these jobs have C's and M's, and we had to take all that off for the accrual. And so there were different things that different conditions that had to be tested to determine all the numbers and which thing had to be removed, and then where each thing went. Like maybe the top part is capital, and then the next part is one of the other categories they have. And so what it does is this program, this macro, it creates a line in this detail for each transaction. So each employee finds, it gets their rate. This is the thing that determines rate, and that's in the worksheet. If they have they can have, so if we look at, if this is the rate, there's a default rate, but if there's something in this category, that's what gets applied. So see, when we get here, we've got 23s and 24. So if there's no rate, there's a default rate. But if there is a number in this column, then the rate is based on that. Any questions on that? So I'm going to close this worksheet. If we need to reopen, if someone has a question, we can reopen it. And I usually don't save because then it's ready for my next. So now this is the Excel that Jeremy is sharing. And it's just a very simple. I wanted to give you, we'll walk through the code on it. I just wanted to give you something that you could learn how to create a worksheet, how to do formulas, how to fill the cells. So on this one also I have it Control M, and I want this to take these names, make me a sheet that has last name first, comma, first name, and make it all caps, and then make an overtime rate as well as the regular pay rate. So I'm just going to do Control M, and there it is. It's the second sheet. And so to do macros, you actually have to open it. You have to enable macros, and just look that up if you need some help with that. Just Google or search for it. But then you have to open this developer tab. If you don't have macros enabled, I'm not sure that will even open. Or if it does, it wouldn't show this macros where you could open it. So I'm going to show the macros. So you would open that, say you can run it from here. But now if I ran this now, it would give me an error because full name sheet is already there and it wouldn't be able to do all that I've asked it to do. So if we edit, the way you create the macro, you set up this sub. So this option explicit is generally at the top, and it kind of helps with some of this. And then a sub is sort of a function. So this is the thing that's going to start the action. In VBA, you have to define all your variables, and that's done with this DIM statement. So we'll just walk through each line of code, and please feel free to jump in and interrupt if you have a question. So we want the workbook. We're saying WB_cur, which I say is the current workbook. That's kind of a short name for a nickname for me to use in all my worksheets if it's the current worksheet. So I'm telling it, I want this thing called WB_CUR, and I want it to be a workbook. And I want a worksheet. So I want a worksheet named that I'm going to refer to as WS_CUR. That's the current worksheet. And then I want a worksheet that's the full names, and this is what I'm calling it. And so that's a worksheet. I'm going to use these variables, and you can do these individuals. So you could do 3 lines and say dim first as string, dim last as string, dim FN, which I've abbreviated for full name, as string. And the integer that we have, and this is the row number. So when you're writing to Excel, you've got to track the row number you're on so you know where to write next. And so initially I want that to be 1. So I'll go ahead and set it up as a 1. You can define it and then give it an initial setting in this manner. And then we have a double, which will be our pay rate and our overtime rate. So then after you've defined it all, you have to set it up. So I'm saying set the workbook, the workbook current as this workbook that I'm using, the worksheet as this worksheet that I'm using. And then I start with the full names worksheet. See, I've got add. So I'm adding it after the current sheet. You can add it wherever you want to. So I'm just adding it at the end. And then I'm going to name the worksheet full names. So when I run this code, it automatically doesn't just name this sheet 2, it names it full names. Now, if you don't name it, it will just be sheet 2 or the next sheet available in Excel. So the Excel will kind of default to what it would name your next sheet if you just created a new sheet. And then I'm dimming this variable as a range. So I'm going from and to a value. Now this is for me to go through the rows of the current worksheet. And I'm going to ask it to give me the value of the cells. Well, this is, okay, so I am actually here, I'm putting in the headings. So cell 1, comma 1, it's row 1, column 1, I want it to be full name. So that's to establish the headings. And then for each row in the current worksheet, this is how you call the current worksheet, and you cycle through its rows. So if the value is blank, is not equal to blank, so I'm looking for data. If I run into a blank, I'm going to quit. So if you went down and you left a blank line after John Freeman, then it wouldn't read any more lines after that. Well, it might try to, and it's kind of fuzzy how Excel does that. Sometimes you might have to just program for it if you're doing blank cells. For example, we never knew on the 2 macros, the accrue time and add time, I never knew what the last page would be because there could be 10 more pages added. And also there are some pages that are hidden from the view, but the program sees those. It knows about them. So I had to program for that. And so the way that I managed to stop that one, it had to be after it read 20 blank lines, it knew it was at the end of all the cells that had data. So once you, so if the value was not blank, and if the value was not first name, because first name was on the sheet, let's see if I can do that. See, on the sheet, first name that's the heading. So that's why I want to pick it out and not do anything with it. I don't want its values. So if it's not the first name, then I'm getting the first name from that cell. I'm getting the last name from the next cell, row 2. And so this RW is the variable that will tell you the cell it's on. So that's the cell that it's on. So it'll just enumerate 1, 2, 3, 4. And then once I get the data, so I read in all 3 values, and then overtime rate equals pay rate times 1.5. I calculate the overtime rate. And then I put the first name and the last name together, so I concatenate all that with a comma, and these little ampersands are the signs you use in VBA to combine or concatenate something. And then we're going to increment that row counter for the worksheet we're adding to. So we're going to add 1, and then we're going to write the value, and then we'll do that until we're finished. And it does print. If we look at in VB, you can also view the immediate window, and like if you had something printed, it would show. It even has in the immediate window, this is the stuff that was printed when we ran the accrue time macro. So it will keep that until you start a new session. But in this one, we just have what we've done in this program. And in VBA also, if all these statements, like if you have an if, you have to have an end if to go with it. Now you can have an else. So this block here is like that's like one block. Now, if I can also have an else. So if I have if else, this would be the end of that block. So it says, if this is true, then do all of the stuff under it. And then this one is, if this is true, do all the stuff under it. Else, leave. So when it is finished, that's why when it gets the blank, I think it would just exit. And then that's just a signal that this statement's complete. It will give you a syntax error if you don't put your ends. Now, the for, to get its end, it needs a next. And then you just end, the sub also has to be ended. And sub is like the function. Now you can have multiple subs in the other macros. There are numerous ones that, so there's a main one and it calls the others. So when I need it to do a particular function, I would just call the next sub. And for example, the one that accrues the invoice, it actually, it sends the workbook to a function so that I just tell it each time I run into a sheet that's one of the days of the week to accrue the time from that sheet. So I'll say accrue time and send it that worksheet name. And then it does what it needs to and sends back what information it needs to. So that's kind of the object-oriented programming, and that's what VBA supports. You could actually do it without doing that, but it would be difficult when you have something like where I need to do the same thing to all 7 sheets. So if I was to do that with code where I couldn't just send the sheet and call it back, would be a lot more challenging. It's possible, but it would be difficult to read and difficult to maintain the code, and it wouldn't be as efficient. And the code would probably, be twice as long. Any questions? I hope this gives some people ideas of oh, look what we could do. I love it when my clients, so they see something that can be done. I think it inspires them to ask more. Could we do this? Could we do something else? And I hope that you all find something in here, that a takeaway of something that you can envision doing with the VBA macro.
Yeah, is there any questions from the audience?
Okay, so now we're going to go to Python. And actually, all the things we just saw in that VBA could be done with a Python program. And for the most part, I prefer the Python. But in cases where the formulas or the macro needs to live in the code, to do it with Python, you'd run a Python program. So you wouldn't even be in your VBA. But like for security reasons, not having Python on your computer, or maybe not running a Python executable. And that's usually the way I do it. I'll bundle up a Python executable. And when I do that, the computer does not have to have Python on, residing on it. It doesn't have to have Python installed. So with an executable, it's just like any other app. You just click on it and it runs. So this is a production schedule. It selects data from a Microsoft Access database, and this is a very large database dating back to 1999. It creates a weekly schedule in an Excel workbook. Before this program, someone had to maintain the database and also go in and make all those changes on this schedule that we're going to see. And there was a lot of room for error. It was very tedious and time consuming. So this is what the schedule looks like. It actually makes the schedule from the day they run the program all the way to the last order that's on file, and usually that's about a year out. The The legend at the top tells what each text color or highlight color means. So a stock order would be an order that's being made to have a product for the shelf. And sometimes the stock order won't get finished until the day before that order needs to ship, or a few days before. And what they'll do is, because in these manufacturing settings, it costs a lot of time to change a machine to make a new product. So they will run, like maybe an order is for 20, and they may run that 20 but add 40 to it to put on the shelf for the next order. Or they may have orders that are quarterly. So a customer orders 80 and they want 20 each quarter. They give them a due date. And so instead of trying to run that 20 and then in 3 months run another 20 of that item, they will run the entire 80 and put it on the shelf. When the order comes due, they just pull off the shelf and ship. So the green ones are where they're making stock orders. They're probably gonna ship out of it, but pretty immediately when it's made. But then they're going to put the rest on the shelf for the other orders that are way down in the schedule. The purple is finished, not shipped. So anything purple in here, they know that's finished and it's either ready to ship or it's on the shelf for the next order. The red is expedite, blue is new, and then this FG is finished goods. So that means these orders that have FG here, they are to ship out of that stock that they've created. If they're running tight, that might not happen until the day they need to ship it or the day before, but hopefully it's done a little bit in advance. And one of the things the program has to do is match up. If there's a job that's the same number, it has to match that green job and put it right above this orange one so that they're together on the schedule. It also gives them options of setting up holidays and reserve days by entering them into a text file. So we have an example here where there's Labor Day, and then sometimes some of these jobs may be very large, so they fill up. The normal thing is 5 jobs a day, and they can do more than 5 like they have here, and it will list them. But where it's giving blanks for them to fill in, like down here is a blank to fill in. There are blanks left and actually bordered if they can put jobs in that day. Once they put day full or week full, they're not supposed to put any more jobs in that space. And this is for engineers and the schedulers who are scheduling the jobs. So if you can imagine that they had to put all these numbers in the database, and these, I know there was a lot of copy pasting, but then every time they put an order into the database, they had to go back and update this schedule. And there were maybe 7 people or more using the schedule. So it was quite cumbersome. So now the way that it's handled is they run this program at the beginning of the week, and then they sort of make notes on the schedule. And if they're scheduling an order way out, all they have to do is type something simple. Like if they're scheduling one for March, well, they can just put in the customer, just something to let them know what it is. They don't have to flesh it all out, because next week it's going to pull all that detail information from the database. And that will be long before they need it. So they just have to know that space is filled. So these are some of the specifications and features. There are also parts jobs in the database where they make the individual parts instead of like a whole product that's going to go to a customer. So we don't include those on the schedule. And then the schedule is more for customer orders, this particular schedule. So we talked about the legend. Now there are things in the database where it says new, ASAP, or hold, and those appear on the schedule if they're checked in the database. If a finished goods job corresponds with the stock job that's open, they also have an option of applying pushback weeks. If they get behind, instead of having like 2 weeks worth of stuff pile up in that first week, this would be the first week here. So if they were 2 weeks behind, this would probably be double in size, and it's very unreasonable. They wouldn't be able to handle it, and it just is confusing. So the way they do that, they have a file they can put the pushback weeks in. They can say, push our due date out 2 weeks. It will apply that to all the orders except the ones they have put this caret in the notes for. And then it knows if it sees that, don't push this job out. It needs to stay where it's at on the schedule. Maybe it's an expedite or a customer that they don't want to wait for. And they can also do that with original ship date. If they want to put anything, if they want something to appear on the schedule that normally wouldn't, they can just put in square brackets. So if they change the due date on something, but for reference, they wanted to keep the original due date, they could just put it in brackets and it will come out on the schedule. And we'll look at some of those. The past due and current week jobs are sorted by date, by job number, except for those finished not ship items, which are purple, and they're at the very beginning of Monday by customer. And then all the other jobs in the schedule get sorted by date and then by job number. I think we'll look at the sheet a little bit, and so I can show you some of these things. Like here's one where I did put, you can see they put due date 6/20, and that means that they wanted to keep that reference. Here's one with a due date, even though they've changed the actual due date. But what would happen is all these orders first are the ones that are due right away, or maybe these past due, and then it starts. So this week is not really just Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I guess Monday and Tuesday, they're kind of working from this as a reference. They're still working on the orders they're working on, but they're also working to get these out the door. And the way the program does this, it figures out based on how many jobs are here in this whole section, and then it divides by 5 to get how many rows or how many columns, and then how many rows it's going to need to accommodate all that. And then it fills up each row until it gets to Friday and it finishes. Then the rest of them just go from the date of the order, the due date of the order. And see how it has the blank spaces where they can put in another order, all the way up to 5, and then it resets. And if they have a column like this that goes down 6 jobs, we don't want to give them 6 blank lines, so we still stop the blank lines at 5. And then this goes all the way, like when you get down to toward the end to, like, say next year, a lot of the weeks are totally empty, but it will still create the schedule all the way out to the last job. Here's some of the code. We'll walk through a little bit of the code. This is connecting to the Access database. Python actually has a connection to many databases, including SQLite, which is built into Python, MySQL, SQL Server. So you just have to go online and find what code you would use to connect to that particular database. These two, the write cell and write blank cell, these are functions. A function is a little chunk of code that does something. And this is part of object-oriented programming, so it's similar to VBA in that way. And many of the data structures are universal. A dictionary, I've used a dictionary to store a lot of things in here. A dictionary actually stores all those jobs, and I find out how many elements are in the dictionary. That's how I know what to divide and create that first column. So VBA also has a dictionary, and the dictionary structure is heavily used in the 2 macros we looked at. So it creates the heading first. Python also has a date time function that has many functions for dealing with dates. So to get the headings, we start with the day that we're on, and we give the time delta. We add a day each time we're going through. So each day I go through, I'm adding a day until the day number is 4, Once I get to 4, I'm done. I've put all the headings on. So what this program actually does, the write cell and write blank cell writes every cell on this worksheet. The code just calls that function, like write cell here in line 172, and it sends it all the information it needs to write that cell, which would be the row, the column, the font color, the field color, and the value of the data that's to be, the text or a value of data, and then a border. It tells it what kind of border to use. And those are defined. I will show you in a moment how we define those things so that it's real quick and easy and clean for the program. So if we look at this, when you call the function, you send this row, column, a tuple, and the tuple has a sort value, a row, a field color, and a text color. And then it has the value, and the value might be Monday, Tuesday, or it might be the date, April 23. And then the item at the end is the border. That's going to be on headings. Maybe that's a plain border, or it could have the top part bold. And you can see I'm using a dictionary for those things too. And then when we write the blank cells, this is what's called. So it actually, the value is a blank plus a new line character. That makes the blank cell be 2 lines, not just 1. And those lines will actually expand down automatically if they have too much for 1 line, like some of the data gets long. So it'll automatically make that row, that column, 3 rows. This is part of what creates the legend. So this is finished, not shipped. One would be the font color and one would be the text color, and then the border. So we do that for each one of those items. Now the colors here are just part of the text editor. So this is from Idle, which is a built-in editor, text editor for Python. So this is its coloring. The red with the pound sign at the beginning, that's just a comment. This one legged up where it was new, that's commented out because they changed how they wanted that done. So you can see the values are different. They changed how they wanted the text color and the font color. This is where we define the colors, the fonts, and the borders. So I make these, usually if you have a value, it's a constant. You make the whole thing capital. So that's actually a variable, but it's all caps. And programs are sensitive, case sensitive to names of the things you're calling. A small letter red text would be a different thing. If I put red text somewhere in my program and didn't uppercase, it wouldn't know what I was talking about. So this just defines all those colors. And what I did was try to match the colors they already had, the colors they were using in their current sheet, so that it's the same thing they're familiar with and really close to the same shade or hue. Then I also defined black text or bold text. So that's one of the things, all the field colors. And then the border is either thin border or thick top. So that when we start a new week, we have a thick top border. So see how this border, the top of it's thick, but all the rest is thin. And I think on the legend, yeah, we just have the plain border on the beginning of the legend. And so this style dictionary, that's how so this makes it real easy because all I have to do when I want to use one of these colors is call its number or one of these formats, so when I'm sending this to that where we write the cell, all I have to do is send those simple numbers. I don't have to spell out that color name, red text, orange field. All I have to do is send that number and it'll know to go pick it up from this dictionary. And when it picks this up, it knows it is what's up here. what's been defined for that item. This is some of the conditional formatting that's used. So if we have that ship finished goods job is true, then we actually add the FG to the job number. And you can see that on any of the ones that are orange. See, we really just had that job number, but this code added that FG. Quite a bit of formatting in here. The ASAP, new, expedite. There are things that have hold, and it's important that they have that if they're a hold, so they don't ship out prematurely. Sometimes if a client asks for a change, I actually will put that in comments so that I know for future purpose what happened. Like initially, we were not putting all those ship finished goods jobs as purple. We would accept it out if it wasn't, but we decided that we just want all of them to be purple because it makes it a lot easier to look at that sheet and see what's already finished on a week. The scaling and margins, initially we didn't have any of this. And this is part of naming the file. I actually name it with a timestamp. So it does by hours, minutes, seconds. That's so that anybody can go into the server and run this. But if they do it at the exact same time, or if I just did it by the date, it would if somebody had it open, it would cause an error because it can't remove and rewrite a file that's open. It couldn't write over while somebody was using the file. So this way it actually creates a new one, and they are supposed to name that what they want, save it to their desktop or whatever if they create one. But really, I think there's one person mainly in charge of scheduling. And what they wanted with this scaling was to be able to open it and send it to the printer. So scaling it this way and setting up these margins made them able to do that. I try to make the code do everything it can, so the user has to do very little to get functionality. In this part here where the 4R in column list, so this column list is actually your true columns. So I tell it for go through that list and make each column, which is defined by R, make each column in that list a width of 30. So that is what makes the that's what makes it all fit together correctly, that being the right width. This is a little example of their holidays and reserve days. So if they want a holiday, they just put in that text file the H comma, this format, and the day, or whatever they want it to say. And the program picks this up and adds it into the schedule. It ignores dates that are older than today and dates beyond the last order date. So that makes them able to go when they do their schedule for 2022, or when the new year's coming, they can just run in and put all their holidays at one time. And the ones will just sit there and wait until they're needed before they appear on the schedule. And then if somebody just doesn't have time to take off something, it's not going to mess up anything. They can delete it when they have time. Thank you for your time and attention. Any questions or comments?